What are the 5 components of emotional intelligence? What we know are leaders who are more emotionally intelligent, make better decisions, have a happier workforce, have greater rates of retention. In this video, I'm going to talk about those 5 components and also focus how you can build each one of those and thus become a better leader. You know, it's often said, IQ will get you in the door, but EQ will get you up the ladder, and no truer statement's ever been made. Well, our IQ finishes around the age of the early 20s, whereas our EQ can grow and develop throughout our lives. We also know from research that leaders who display higher levels of emotional intelligence tend to have happier workforces, people who are more loyal, people who have less turnover, people who express greater satisfaction in the workplace. Today, I want to share the 5 components that make up emotional intelligence, these 5 building blocks, and then focus on how you can build upon each of these blocks to become the leader that you would like to be. So what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is our ability to recognize and to understand our own emotions, and then our ability to recognize and understand the emotions of others. Daniel Goleman, who was at the forefront of exploring this concept of emotional intelligence, also delineated 5 different components that make up emotional intelligence. Let's explore all 5. Number 1 is self-awareness. Hey, how do you feel today? You know, how many times a day are we asked that question? And truth be told, no one really wants us to respond, well, if you really want to know, let me tell you how I feel today. Really what they're looking for is a polite, I'm fine. However, at the core of that question is a really great indication of how emotionally intelligent we are. How do you feel at this moment? How do you feel when you first got up? How will you feel when you go to bed tonight? And our ability to name the emotion in the moment really is a good indicator of how self-aware we are. What we know is that people who have greater self-awareness have larger vocabularies when it comes to their emotional life. They're able to distinguish between this emotion or that emotion, and they're also able to talk about the intensity of the emotion. Is this feeling at a very low intensity, or is it something at a very high intensity? And why is labeling important? Labeling is incredibly important because we know the greater our ability to label also increases our ability to manage our emotion in the moment. The second thing about self-awareness is, are we able to physiologically feel what's happening in our body as our emotions are happening? Now, our body begins to generate sensations before we even become conscious that we are in the midst of an emotion. And therefore, if we are aware of these sensations in our body, we then are able to respond quicker to the emotion that is happening. So do we feel a change in our breath? Do we feel a change in our heart rate? Is our body getting hotter or colder? Are our muscles beginning to tense? All of these are signs, physiological signs, that come with self-awareness. And then finally, there is triggers. We all have our emotional triggers. And the strength of our triggers depend on how young we were when that trigger came, how recent that trigger is, or how intense the emotional experience was. But self-aware people are able to identify their triggers and know their triggers and know their trigger patterns. All of this goes in to creating that first component of emotional intelligence, self-awareness. The second component of emotional intelligence is self-regulation. You know, it's one thing to know the emotion we're feeling, to know how intense that emotion is, to know that we're feeling tense in our body. It's another thing to regulate those emotions. And people with high self-regulation basically have a large toolkit to press upon whenever they need to deal with certain emotions. They have practices that they can turn to. You know, I used to play golf. And the game of golf, you were given a set of tools, golf clubs. And depending on the certain circumstance, the context of the golf course, how far your ball laid, the direction of the wind, etc., you would decide to use one club over another club. And so it is with our emotional lives. Whenever we are triggered or something's happening, we can turn to a certain practice or another practice to help us manage the emotion in the moment. Sometimes we're able to take a breath, we're able to step a little bit away and deal with the emotion. At other times, that emotion may be so intense, we just have to say, time out, and walk away. All of those are qualities of emotional regulation and help us use our emotions to achieve the goals that we want to in the moment. The third component is motivation. People who have high levels of emotional intelligence are able to know what motivates them. They're able to self-motivate. They're able to move towards a goal and to motivate themselves towards that goal. What's more, what we tend to see is people with high levels of motivation are able to read the motivation levels of others in their group. And they're also able to explore what motivates others. Now, I don't know about you, but so much of leadership is all about that motivation. To self-motivate oneself, but also to be able to read those we work with, what motivates them, and how do I, in turn, motivate them. The fourth component is empathy. It's the ability to really put ourselves in the other person's shoes, to feel what they are feeling. Now, this can come in different ways. We can intellectually begin to acknowledge how they might be feeling, or we can actually begin to feel in ourselves the feeling that they are having. Now, empathy is really interesting because you really need empathy to be emotional intelligent, but too much of it, you'll find yourself over-empathizing with another person. How does that show up? Well, if a person's got a problem, you want to first of all have enough empathy to be able to acknowledge or feel what they are feeling and to be able to listen to what they're going through. However, too much, and as a leader, you might not challenge them because you're afraid, etc., of what they're going through. And so therefore, it's incredibly important to have that right balance of empathy. And the fifth component is social skills. It's bringing all of these elements together, and it's the ability to interact with others. It's the ability to have solid discussions, to develop emotional relationships with other people. It's the ability to make clear decisions by bringing everyone on board. It's the ability to have constructive conflict with another person and manage that conflict as well. There you are, 5 critical components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. All of them are building blocks upon which we build the emotional intelligence, which is so critical to our leadership. Hey, did you go to the gym today? If you did, it's probably because you value physical health. Well, I'm wondering, did you also go to the emotional gym today? Did you integrate into your practice some emotional exercises that will help you build the building blocks of really strong emotional intelligence? If you want to develop your emotional intelligence, watch this video on how to develop trust and confidence in the workplace.